I can still feel the weight of the champagne glass in my hand as I stood up at my daughter's baby shower. The pink and gold balloons, the elegant garden setting, the 50 women in sundresses turning to stare at me in shocked silence. My daughter's eyes filled with tears, not of joy, but of betrayal. My son-in-law's mother, her perfectly painted lips forming a tight line of fury. That was the moment I destroyed the happiest day of my daughter's pregnancy. And God help me, I would do it again. My name is Ruth Callahan, and I'm 62 years old. I've been a family therapist for 35 years, seen hundreds of families torn apart by secrets and control. I thought I knew all the warning signs. I thought I could recognize manipulation when I saw it. But when it came to my own daughter's life, I almost missed it. Almost let my beautiful Sarah walk straight into a trap that would have cost her everything. Let me tell you what really happened, and you can decide if I'm a hero or a monster. It started 18 months ago when Sarah brought David Ashford home for Thanksgiving. I remember opening the door to find them standing there, Sarah glowing with that new love radiance, and David with his hand resting possessively on her shoulder. He was handsome in that prep school way, sandy blonde hair, expensive casual clothes that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Everything about him screamed old money, from his confident handshake to the bottle of wine that probably cost $300. "Mrs. Callahan, Sarah has told me absolutely everything about you," he said, and I felt that first whisper of unease. Not because he was rude, but because the emphasis on everything felt like a warning, like he was letting me know he had information, but I pushed it down. Sarah was 31, a successful architect, and she'd dated enough losers that I was just relieved she'd found someone stable. They'd been dating for 8 months, met at a gallery opening where David worked in his family's investment firm. The Ashfords were Connecticut royalty, the kind of family that had buildings named after them at Yale. David's mother, Vivian Ashford, sat on the boards of 3 museums and 2 hospitals. His father had been a federal judge before he passed away 5 years ago. On paper, David was perfect. Maybe too perfect. I'm ashamed to say I was impressed at first. After watching Sarah struggle through her 20s with commitment-phobic artists and musicians who couldn't hold jobs, David seemed like a gift. He had a career, a trust fund, ambitions. He wanted marriage and children, things Sarah had stopped believing she'd find. The engagement came 6 months later. Sarah called me sobbing with happiness, and I swallowed my concerns. When David asked for my blessing over dinner at an exclusive restaurant, I gave it. What right did I have to object? He hadn't done anything wrong. He was polite, successful, clearly adored my daughter. The fact that he wanted to plan the wedding at his family's estate, that his mother had opinions about everything from the flowers to the guest list, that Sarah started canceling our weekly lunch dates because she was so busy with wedding planning, these were just normal things, weren't they? The wedding was elegant, expensive, entirely orchestrated by Vivian Ashford. I barely recognized my daughter in the designer gown Vivian had chosen, standing in a ceremony that felt more like a coronation than a celebration of love. But Sarah looked happy. Who was I to question that? Then came the pregnancy, announced at their first anniversary dinner. Sarah was radiant, terrified, excited. David seemed pleased in that controlled way of his. But it was Vivian's reaction that stopped my heart. She stood up at the restaurant, kissed Sarah's cheek, and said, "Finally, an Ashford heir. Don't worry, darling. I'll make sure everything is done properly." The Ashford babies have been raised a certain way for 4 generations. I watched Sarah's smile falter just for a second, watched her glance at David, who was nodding along with his mother's words, and something cold settled in my stomach. The next 8 months were a slow descent into something I couldn't quite name. Vivian was involved in every decision. The nursery was decorated according to Ashford family tradition, all whites and creams, nothing colorful that might overstimulate the baby. Sarah wanted to breastfeed, but Vivian insisted that Ashford babies were formula-fed, had been for generations. It was healthier, cleaner, more precise. Sarah wanted to work part-time after maternity leave, but Vivian suggested that perhaps Sarah should take a few years off, focus on being a mother, not spread herself too thin. Every time I saw my daughter, she seemed smaller somehow. The vibrant architect who'd once stayed up all night working on designs she was passionate about, who laughed too loud and wore bright colors, was disappearing into beige cardigans and quiet agreement. I tried to talk to her once, 2 months before the baby shower. We were supposed to have lunch, but she canceled, said she was tired. I drove to her house anyway, found her sitting in the pristine nursery, staring at the white walls with tears running down her face. "Honey, what's wrong?" I sat beside her, took her hand. "Nothing, Mom. I'm just hormonal." She wiped her face quickly, the way you do when you've had a lot of practice hiding tears. "Vivian's coming over in an hour. She wants to review the birth plan again." "Again?" "Sweetheart, it's your birth. Don't you get to decide?" Her laugh was bitter. "You don't understand. The Ashfords have used the same doctor for 3 generations. They have protocols. Vivian says if I want David's support, I need to respect his family's traditions. And if you don't want to?" She looked at me then, and I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. Then I'm being difficult, hormonal, not thinking of what's best for the baby. "Mom, please, I can't do this right now. Please just go." I left, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I told myself I was overreacting. Vivian was overbearing, yes, but lots of mothers-in-law were. This was just family dynamics, boundary issues, things that could be worked out with time and communication. But I couldn't stop thinking about Sarah's face. That fear. So I did what I'm not proud of. I used my professional network, called a colleague who worked in family law, asked hypothetically about grandparents' rights, about what would happen if a mother was deemed unfit. The answers she gave me made my blood run cold. Then I started watching more carefully. Noticed that David always had his phone pointed at Sarah, always recording. "For the baby book," he'd say. But he filmed everything. Her eating habits, her mood swings, the time she got frustrated trying to assemble a crib and threw the instruction manual across the room. Always filming. I noticed that Vivian had gotten Sarah to sign papers. "Just insurance documents, darling. Making sure the baby is protected if anything happens." Sarah had signed them, trusting, not reading the fine print, because why would you? They were family. 3 weeks before the baby shower, I did something I've never done before. I went through Sarah's trash, followed the garbage truck on collection day, claimed I'd accidentally thrown away important papers. The sanitation worker, bless him, let me look. I found drafts of documents. Legal letters that Vivian had thrown away, presumably revised versions. But these drafts were clear enough. They outlined concerns about Sarah's emotional instability during pregnancy, her refusal to follow medical advice, her hostile attitude toward family support. They referenced the videos David had taken. They built a case, careful and methodical, for why Sarah might not be fit to have primary custody of her child. I sat in my car, hands shaking, reading about how my daughter was being systematically documented, how every bad day, every hormone-driven tear, every moment of normal pregnancy frustration was being recorded as evidence against her. And at the bottom of one draft letter, a note in Vivian's handwriting, "Insufficient for emergency custody. Need more documentation. Baby shower opportunity?" The baby shower was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Vivian had insisted on hosting it at the Ashford estate. Of course she had. I went home and I did what I should have done months ago. I hired a private investigator. Cost me $3,000 I didn't have, but I needed to know if I was crazy. If I was seeing patterns that weren't there. The investigator called me 4 days before the baby shower. "Mrs. Callahan, I need to come to your house." What I found? You need to see it in person. Her name was Diana Torres, and she sat at my kitchen table with a file that made me feel sick. "Vivian Ashford did this before," Diana said. 22 years ago. David had a sister. Did you know that? I didn't. Isabella Ashford. Married young, had a baby. Vivian deemed her an unfit mother. Took her to court for custody. 1. Isabella lost her daughter, ended up with supervised visitation only. She died 7 years ago. Suicide. The room spun. David never mentioned a sister. The family buried it. Literally, Isabella's buried in a cemetery 2 states away under her married name. No Ashford headstone, no family acknowledgement. The daughter, Rebecca, was raised by Vivian. She's 21 now, and according to my sources, she hasn't spoken to her mother's family in years. Blames them for not fighting harder. Diana slid photos across the table. Legal documents. Hospital records showing Isabella had been diagnosed with postpartum depression, normal and treatable, but Vivian had used it to paint her as dangerously unstable. Vivian's testimony describing incidents that were later proven exaggerated or outright fabricated. A pattern of control, documentation, manipulation. There's more, Diana said quietly. Vivian's lawyer, the one who handled Isabella's case, same firm that sent Sarah those insurance papers. Same lawyer who's been CC'd on emails between Vivian and David discussing Sarah's concerning behaviors. They're building a case, Mrs. Callahan. And the baby shower? Vivian's invited 3 family law attorneys to attend, ostensibly as friends, but I'm guessing they'll be there to witness whatever she's planning. I spent the next 3 days trying to reach Isabella's daughter, Rebecca. Finally found her through social media, sent a desperate message. She called me at 11 p.m. the night before the baby shower. Is Vivian doing to your daughter what she did to my mom? Her voice was shaking. I think so. My mom was the kindest person. She wasn't perfect. She struggled after I was born, but she loved me. Vivian took me from her, told me my whole childhood that my mom was crazy, dangerous. I didn't learn the truth until I was 18 and found the court documents. By then, my mom was dead. Rebecca's voice broke. Don't let her do this to your daughter. I'll help however I can. Can you come to the baby shower tomorrow? Can you tell people what really happened? There was a long pause. Yes. God, yes. Someone needs to stop her. I should have called Sarah that night. Should have shown up at her door with all the evidence, begged her to see what was happening. But I knew my daughter, knew she'd defend David, defend her marriage, defend the family she'd chosen. She'd say I was interfering, that I was trying to sabotage her happiness because of my own failed marriage decades ago. She'd marry into this family even more deeply out of spite, out of pride, out of desperate hope that I was wrong. So I made a choice that still haunts me. I would let the baby shower happen. Let Vivian show her hand, and I would be there to stop it. The Ashford estate was everything you'd expect. Manicured gardens, a house that belonged in a magazine, staff in uniforms serving champagne and tiny sandwiches, 50 women in expensive sundresses, friends of Vivian's mostly, a few of Sarah's friends looking uncomfortable in this setting. Sarah herself looked beautiful in a flowing blue dress, 8 months pregnant and glowing despite the exhaustion in her eyes. I arrived early, found Diana already there, blending in as someone's +1. And at 2 p.m., just as the gift opening was about to begin, Rebecca walked in. Vivian's face went white when she saw her. Actually white. But she recovered quickly, that polite society smile never faltering. Rebecca, what a surprise. I didn't know you were in town. I came specifically for this. Rebecca's voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. She was braver than I could ever be. The afternoon proceeded like a performance. Sarah opened gifts, thanked everyone graciously. Vivian orchestrated everything, making small, cutting comments disguised as humor. Sarah, dear, you're opening that so clumsily. Here, let me help. Goodness, you're getting tired so easily. Perhaps you should sit more during your day, take it easy, not push yourself so hard. I watched David filming it all. Every moment of Sarah's exhaustion, her fumbling with ribbon, the time she got emotional over a gift from her college roommate, all documented. Then came the toasts. Several women stood, said lovely things about babies and motherhood and joy. And then Vivian stood, champagne glass in hand, and I felt the temperature in the garden drop. To my dear daughter-in-law, Vivian began, and her voice was warm honey. Sarah, you're about to embark on the most important journey of your life. Motherhood is a privilege, but also an enormous responsibility. It requires sacrifice, discipline, the ability to put the child's needs above your own desires. She paused, smiled around at the assembled guests. I noticed 3 women in business suits, taking notes. Diana had been right about the lawyers. The Ashford family has very high standards for child rearing. We believe in structure, tradition, the wisdom of generations. And while I know Sarah comes from a very different background, she glanced at me, smile never wavering. I'm confident that with proper guidance, she'll learn to provide the stability and consistency an Ashford child requires. Sarah's smile was frozen on her face. In fact, Vivian continued, I've already made arrangements for the first few months after the baby is born. David and Sarah will be moving into the east wing of the house, where I can help with nighttime feedings, make sure Sarah gets the rest she needs. We'll have a nanny, of course, someone from the service we've used for 4 generations. And I'll be there every step of the way to make sure nothing goes wrong. It was said so pleasantly, so reasonably. The other guests were nodding, smiling, thinking how lovely that this grandmother was so involved. They didn't see what I saw, didn't see the trap closing. Because, Vivian raised her glass higher, a child deserves stability, a mother who is prepared, who follows medical advice, who doesn't let her emotions compromise her judgment. And if Sarah ever feels overwhelmed, if she struggles the way some women do, she can rest assured that this baby will have a family ready to step in and provide the care it needs, no matter what that takes. The words landed like a threat wrapped in silk. Sarah stood up suddenly, champagne glass tilting in her hand, spilling on her dress. I need some air. Darling, you're proving my point, Vivian said gently. So emotional, so unpredictable. This is exactly why you need support. And David, my son-in-law, the father of my grandchild, put his hand on Sarah's shoulder and said, Mom's right, honey. Just sit down. You're making a scene. That's when I stood up. 50 faces turned to me. Sarah's eyes pleading with me not to do this. Vivian's face, a mask of polite inquiry with rage simmering beneath. Rebecca, standing at the back, nodding at me. I can't let this continue, I said, and my voice was shaking, but loud enough to carry across the garden. Vivian Ashford is not trying to help my daughter. She's building a custody case. The garden erupted in gasps, whispers. Vivian's expression didn't change, but her knuckles went white around her champagne glass. That's absurd, she said. Ruth, I know you've struggled with letting Sarah grow up, but these accusations are delusional. I pulled out the folder Diana had prepared. You did this before. To your daughter Isabella. You took her baby, destroyed her life, drove her to suicide. Someone screamed. I think it was one of Vivian's friends. Sarah stood frozen, staring at me like I'd become a stranger. That is a vicious lie, Vivian hissed, the polite mask finally cracking. Isabella was mentally ill, unfit. The courts agreed. Because you manipulated them. Rebecca's voice cut through the chaos. She walked forward, and I could see tears streaming down her face. I'm Rebecca Ashford, Isabella's daughter. Your granddaughter, though you've never once acknowledged me as such. My mother wasn't crazy. She was a good person who had postpartum depression. Normal, treatable postpartum depression. But you used it to take me from her, and she never recovered. Vivian actually stumbled backward. Rebecca, you don't understand. Your mother was dangerous. I had to protect you. You told the courts she threatened to hurt me. I found the documents. She never threatened me. You made it up. And then you spent my whole childhood telling me she was too unstable to see me, that I was better off without her. I believed you until I was old enough to find the truth myself. By then, she was dead. The garden was dead silent now. One of the lawyers was edging toward the exit. And now you're doing it to Sarah, I continued, my voice stronger now. Every video David's been taking, every document you've had her sign, every witness to her emotional instability, you're building the same case. You were going to use today to document more evidence in front of lawyers. And then, when the baby is born, you were going to take it. Just like you took Rebecca. This is insane, David said, but his voice was uncertain now. Mom, tell them this is insane. Vivian's face had gone hard. David, we're leaving. Now. But Diana stood up then, moved to block the exit. I'm a private investigator, and I have copies of every document, every email, every text message between Vivian and her lawyers discussing this custody plan, including the ones talking about using today's event as documentation of Sarah's erratic behavior. Sarah was staring at David now. Did you know? About your sister? About what your mother did? The silence was damning. Did you know? Sarah's voice was rising now, pregnancy hormones and betrayal and rage combining into something that made even Vivian step back. Baby, listen, it's not like that. Did you know your mother was planning to take my child? David looked at his mother, then at Sarah, and I saw him make his choice. Mom said you were struggling, that you needed help. She was just trying to protect the baby, protect you, by documenting every time I cried, every time I was tired, every time I was human. Sarah's hands were on her belly. Protective. You were helping her build a case against me? You don't understand our family, David said, and there was anger in his voice now. We have standards. My mother knows what's best. If you can't handle that, get away from me. Sarah's voice was ice. Get away from me right now. What happened next was chaos. David trying to apologize, Vivian threatening lawsuits, the guests fleeing like the garden was on fire, Sarah's friends surrounding her, helping her to a chair, Rebecca holding Sarah's hand, 2 generations of Vivian's victims finding each other. And me, standing there with my empty champagne glass, watching my daughter's life implode, wondering if I'd just saved her or destroyed her. Sarah wouldn't speak to me for 3 months. She moved in with her best friend, filed for divorce, got a restraining order against Vivian. David fought it, but once Sarah's lawyer pulled the same records Isabella's lawyer had filed, once the pattern was undeniable, David's lawyers advised him to settle quickly and quietly. Those 3 months were hell. Sarah blocked my number, refused my visits. Her friends told me she was devastated, that she'd trusted David completely, that my revelation at the shower had shattered her world. She blamed me for not warning her sooner, for ruining the one day she was supposed to feel celebrated and loved. I started seeing a therapist myself. Spent sessions asking the same question over and over. Did I do the right thing? Could I have handled it differently? Should I have gone to Sarah privately, given her the evidence, let her make her own choice? My therapist asked me what I thought would have happened if I had. I knew the answer. Sarah would have defended David, would have convinced herself I was wrong, that Vivian was just overbearing but harmless, that their love would overcome family dysfunction. She would have had that baby in Vivian's house, under Vivian's control. And by the time she realized the truth, it might have been too late. 3 months after the shower, on a Tuesday evening, Sarah knocked on my door. She was 2 weeks from her due date, huge and beautiful, and still not speaking to me. We stood there staring at each other, and I didn't know if she'd come to forgive me or to tell me I'd never meet my grandchild. "Can I come in?" she asked. We sat in my living room, the same room where Diana had shown me the evidence about Isabella. Sarah was quiet for a long time, her hands moving restlessly over her belly. "I hired my own investigator," she finally said. "After I calmed down, after I started thinking about everything you'd said, I wanted to prove you wrong." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I wanted to find evidence that you'd misunderstood, that David didn't know, that Vivian was just overprotective but not malicious." She pulled out her own folder, much thicker than the one Diana had given me. I found 3 other women, 3 other daughters-in-law who'd married into families Vivian associated with. All of them lost custody of their children. All of them had been documented as unstable, unfit. Vivian was like a consultant, teaching these wealthy families how to maintain control, how to take children from mothers who didn't fit their standards. My hands went to my mouth. Oh my God. There's a whole network of them, Mom. Rich families who see their grandchildren as property, as legacy, as things to control rather than people to love. And Vivian? She's been helping them for 20 years. Since Isabella. She turned her own trauma into a business model. Sarah's voice broke. Isabella wasn't the only one who died. 2 of the other mothers committed suicide. Another one disappeared, just vanished, and her family thinks she changed her identity to escape. These women lost their children to the same system that's supposed to protect children, all because they married into the wrong families. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face. If you hadn't stopped it at the shower, if you hadn't exposed Vivian publicly in front of witnesses, I would be next. The baby would be born, and within 6 months, I'd lose custody. Vivian had it all planned out. Postpartum depression diagnosis, documented instability, emergency custody hearing. By the time I realized what was happening, it would be too late. "I hated you," Sarah said. "I hated you so much for humiliating me, for destroying what I thought was my family, for exposing David as someone who would help his mother steal my baby. I told everyone you were jealous, controlling, couldn't let go." "I know," I whispered. But then I kept thinking about that video David took when I dropped a glass and cried because I was exhausted. The way Vivian would say things that sounded supportive but made me feel incompetent. How I'd started to believe I wasn't going to be a good mother, that I needed their help, that maybe they were right about me. She squeezed my hand. You saw it when I couldn't. And you did the hardest thing. You let me hate you to save my baby. We both cried then, holding each other the way we hadn't since she was a child. I'm sorry I did it that way, I said. If I could go back, maybe I would have tried harder to warn you first, to make you listen before it got to that point. Sarah shook her head. I wouldn't have believed you. You know I wouldn't have. I was so in love with the idea of this perfect family, this perfect life. I would have thought you were jealous of my happiness, trying to sabotage it because your own marriage failed. You had to make it impossible for me to ignore, impossible for me to go back, but you hated me for it. I did. I don't anymore. She put my hand on her belly, where I could feel my grandchild moving. You gave me back my life, Mom. You gave me back my baby. You're the only reason I'm still free. That was 8 months ago. Sarah had a beautiful daughter, named her Isabella Ruth. She's in therapy, working through the betrayal and the fear. She's dating again, carefully, with new boundaries and awareness. She's rebuilding her architectural practice, taking commissions again, wearing bright colors. Rebecca is part of our lives now. She visits, brings stories about Isabella that Vivian never wanted told. 2 families, broken by the same woman, healing together. David moved to California. The divorce settlement was expedited once Sarah's lawyer threatened to make everything public. Vivian faces no legal consequences. Her friends have closed ranks, dismissed the accusations as lies. The other families in her network remain protected by money and power, and the fact that the courts still favor wealthy, stable-seeming grandparents over struggling young mothers. It's not the justice I wanted, but it's something. I still get emails sometimes from women who were at that baby shower. Some thank me, say I was brave, that they've since left their own toxic family situations. Others call me cruel, say I humiliated Sarah for my own ego, that I had no right to interfere. One woman wrote, "You destroyed your daughter's chance at a good life. I hope she never forgives you." Maybe she's right. Maybe there was a better way, a kinder way, a way that didn't involve destroying a baby shower and exposing my daughter's marriage as a trap in front of 50 witnesses. But when I think about what might have happened if I'd stayed silent, when I imagine Sarah losing Isabella the way Rebecca lost her mother, when I remember the look in Vivian's eyes as she toasted to Sarah's impending guidance, I know I'd make the same choice again. Because here's what I've learned in my 62 years, what my career as a therapist has taught me over and over. Sometimes love means letting your child hate you. Sometimes protecting someone means hurting them first. Sometimes the right thing is also the hardest thing, the thing that leaves you standing alone in a garden while everyone walks away. I destroyed my daughter's baby shower. I stood up with my hands shaking and my heart breaking, and I shattered her perfect moment, her perfect family fantasy, her perfect life. I became the villain in her story, the crazy mother who couldn't let go, who saw danger where everyone else saw love. Except the danger was real, and I saw it when no one else did. Would I do it differently? Maybe. I'd try harder to make Sarah see the warning signs earlier. I'd have sat her down with Diana's evidence weeks before, begged her to listen. I'd have done everything I could to let her make her own informed choice instead of having to make it for her. But would I stay silent? Would I watch my daughter walk into a trap that had already killed 3 women and destroyed countless lives? Would I let propriety and politeness and fear of conflict stop me from standing up? Never, because that's what mothers do. We stand between our children and danger, even when they don't see it coming. Especially then, we make the impossible choices. We bear the hatred and the blame. We become the villains in their stories, if that's what it takes to keep them safe. So yes, I destroyed my daughter's baby shower. And yes, I'd do it again. Because she's free. She has her daughter. She's healing. She's alive. And that's worth every moment of doubt, every sleepless night, every accusation that I was wrong, every second of those 3 months when my daughter hated me. I stood in that garden with my champagne glass shaking and my voice breaking. And I chose my daughter's future over her present. I chose her child's safety over her temporary happiness. I chose the truth over comfort. And 8 months later, when she held Isabella in her arms and whispered, "Thank you for saving us," I knew I'd made the right choice. Even if it was the hardest choice I've ever made, even if it cost me months of my daughter's love, even if some part of me will always wonder if there was a softer way. Because at the end of the day, I'm her mother. And protecting her, protecting my granddaughter, is what I do, no matter what it costs, no matter who hates me for it. That's love. The kind that's willing to be misunderstood. The kind that's willing to be the villain. The kind that knows sometimes the cruelest thing you can do is nothing at all.